This is Ronnie Oneal. He is a double murder suspect in Riverview, Florida.
If you think I'm here to play around with y'all, God damn it, I'm not.
Oneal was 29 when he fatally shot his then-girlfriend Kenyatta Barron. Following this, he murdered their own daughter by striking her multiple times with a hatchet. She was only 9 years old. Oneal also stabbed their 8-year-old son before pouring gasoline all over the house and setting it on fire. Oneal was arrested upon fleeing the burning house. The son was able to escape, but was critically wounded and suffered from burns. The first 911 call on the incident was from the girlfriend, who was heard screaming before suddenly hanging up. 8 minutes later, another call came in from Oneal.
911, what is your emergency?
Hey, I just been attacked by some white demons inside Kiki. Kiki, her name is Kiki, and she tried to kill me.
After the arrest, Oneal was psychologically cleared to represent himself in court. During the trial, he cross-examined his now 11-year-old son, who he stabbed, to which the son explained everything that happened.
It's good to see you, man.
Good to see you too.
Did I hurt you that night of this incident?
Yes,
I did. And how did I hurt you?
you stabbed me.
Oneal also accused the prosecution of fabricating evidence.
Because he's playing a fraudulent damn recording of me beating Kenyatta Barron. I did kill Kenyatta Barron.
After Oneal was found guilty at his sentencing, the judge went on to say this was the worst case she's ever seen.
This is the worst case ever in my life, and I have seen some horrors.
He also stated that he was not sorry for what he did.
I am not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
Oneal was given a total of 3 life sentences, plus 90 years without parole. For Oneal's son, he was adopted by the detective who cared for him the night of the murders. Oneal's actions were horrible. However, nothing could prepare you for the reaction of Jeremy Christian. This is Jeremy Christian, who was found guilty of murdering 2 people in Portland, Oregon. Christian was on a packed train when he suddenly broke out on a racial rant towards 2 young women. You can see bystanders step in to attempt to stop Christian. Unfortunately, the situation escalated, and Christian stabbed and killed 2 men, seriously wounding a third. You can see Christian fleeing the crime scene. Passengers of the train followed him, and he was arrested about a mile away. During the arrest, you can see Christian in the back of the patrol car. Christian was later found guilty of 2 counts of murder and attempted murder. Now, at the sentencing, one of the victims delivers a victim impact statement, and this is where Christian has an outburst.
To Mr. Jeremy Christian, your mom should have swallowed you. You are a waste of breath, and when you die and go to hell, I hope you rot.
See you there.
After Christian is escorted out of the courtroom, the judge's sentence set him to 2 consecutive life terms plus more than 25 years for his other convictions. Christian got exactly what he deserved. However, this wasn't the only time convicts got a sentence that was so befitting viewers can't get enough of it, like the case of Christopher McNabb. This is Christopher McNabb, who is facing charges for the murder of his 2-week-old child in Covington, Georgia. After the child's mother reported the baby missing to police, local law enforcement immediately launched a search. Later that night, McNabb is seen in front of TV cameras begging for his child back.
I want my kid back, man. That's my child, man. I want my kid, man.
The next day, the child's body was found in a nearby wooded area. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, which was later ruled a homicide. McNabb was arrested and charged with the murder of his own 2-week-old baby. After he was found guilty, we now move on to the sentencing. McNabb can then be heard claiming his innocence.
I'm innocent. I didn't do it. I've maintained that the whole time. I would never do this. That's all I gotta say. I would never do it. I'm innocent.
And now the judge lets McNabb unknowingly choose his own sentence.
You claim you're innocent, so you tell me what sentence the man or woman that you claim did this should receive.
if you ever find out who did them, they deserve to be under the jail.
Okay, so they ought to get the maximum sentence.
Most definitely.
Okay. On the crime of malice murder, I sentence you to life in confinement without parole.
After McNabb was handed down the max sentence, he was moved to Hayes State Prison in Tryon, Georgia, where he is serving his life sentence. However evil is Christopher, the next case leads to Kaila Mendoza, who tweeted this the same night she took 2 girls' lives in a deadly drunk driving crush. This is Kaila Mendoza, who's facing charges for double manslaughter among other charges in Florida. The 20-year-old woman, who was not licensed to drive, was convicted of the murder of 2 women while drunk driving in Fort Lauderdale, Florida on November 17, 2013. Before the crash, Mendoza went to a local bar with her manager and colleagues from her job, where she drank 2 fishbowl margaritas. A few hours later, Mendoza got behind the wheel of a Hyundai Sonata and drove the wrong way on the Sawgrass Expressway.
Kayla hopped into her car and went speeding the wrong way down the freeway at more than 80 miles an hour. She collided head-on with another car, killing these 2 beautiful young women, Marissa Cotroneo and Caitlin Ferrante, both just 21.
Mendoza was charged with 2 counts of DUI manslaughter while impaired, 2 counts of DUI manslaughter with an unlawful blood alcohol level, 2 counts of vehicular homicide, and 2 counts of driving without a license causing death. Mendoza's then boyfriend owned the Hyundai Sonata, involved in the crash, and explained that the "too drunk to care" tweet was directed toward him.
"Too drunk to care" tweet was for my boyfriend because he was upset I was out, hanging out with them and with Marcelo drinking, because he wanted me to be home.
The Ferrante and Cotroneo families filed lawsuits against Mendoza, her boyfriend, the T-Mobile store where Mendoza was employed, and the Tijuana taxi company. On May 4, 2015, 2 months after pleading guilty to 2 DUI manslaughter charges, Mendoza was sentenced to 24 years in prison. Mendoza was apologetic throughout the trial, and when she heard her sentence, her apology and crying intensified.
How much time passes, I'm gonna live with that heart every day.
After her sentence, Mendoza will also serve 6 years of probation and is permanently banned from driving a motor vehicle. Mendoza's apologies and remorse showed that she may yet be saved. However, other cases went viral because of rather unusual rulings, like the case of Susan Marie Mellen, a woman who spent a staggering 17 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit. She was allegedly involved in the beating to death of Richard Daley, a homeless man. At 42 years old, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. She's seen here in an interrogation, begging a detective to believe she's innocent and didn't commit the crimes she's accused of.
Anyway, are you sick, ill, or injured? Do you have any medical problems?
No, but I do.
Okay, I'm gonna book you. No, I'm not gonna believe. I'm talking homicide. A man was murdered. All right.
I didn't murder him.
Susan was found guilty based on the testimony of an informant who was later discovered to be a pathological liar.
I would never, from my heart and my soul, I would never let somebody do that to anybody. I didn't hate Rick. I would never let anybody do somebody I hated. I had feelings for the man. He was good to me. He was good to me. He was good to my kids.
During Susan's interrogation, she was persistent on the fact that she was innocent and could never be a murderer. However, Detective Wynn from the LAPD didn't believe her. In fact, she was so certain Susan murdered Rick that she arrested Susan for murder before her interrogation was even over. With no one else to listen to her, Susan turned to God and prayed she wasn't actually going to be arrested for a murder she did not commit. Fast forward 17 years, Susan is 59 years old, and now this is the moment that Mellen's case is finally overturned.
The petition is granted, the judgment is vacated, the conviction is overturned, and as to Miss Mellen, the case is dismissed.
Watch as she is instantly met with tears of joy and an outpouring of emotions as she hugged her grandchild for the first time. She said she had always believed the truth would come to light someday.
I even wrote freedom on the bottom of my tennis shoes with a black marker because I believe I was going to be free.
She never lost faith and maintained her conviction that she would walk free one day. Now that the day had arrived, she couldn't contain her happiness and even broke into a joyful dance as Susan embraced her family. She forgave those who wrongly imprisoned her, emphasizing the importance of forgiving even one's enemies. She eagerly anticipated sharing a McDonald's Happy Meal with her youngest daughter, reminiscent of the day they couldn't have one due to her arrest.
In prison, but freedom wasn't in me. I always felt like I was free on the inside. Well, I still kind of in shock. I don't know if it still hasn't hit me.
I didn't want to be bitter. I didn't want to be a miserable lifer. I knew I was going to go home.
Is that your first cell phone?
Yeah, I never had one. I don't even know how to turn it on. I'm free!
The state of California awarded Mellen $597,000 in compensation, and reportedly, the Los Angeles City Council agreed to pay $12 million to Susan Mellen. However, Susan Mellen isn't the only person whose exoneration case went viral. There's the case of Daniel Villegas, who spent 18 years in prison for a double homicide he never committed. At the young age of 16, Daniel was convicted and has been behind bars since. On April 10, 1993, Armando Mondolazo, 17, and Bobby England, 18, along with two other individuals, were walking home from a house party when a car approached them slowly and sped away. Witnesses reported that the car turned around and came back toward the group, eventually stopping. Someone from the back seat opened fire, tragically killing Lazo and England. However, the story doesn't end there. You're probably wondering how Daniel became a suspect to the case in the first place. Well, as it turns out, there was actually no physical evidence linking Daniel to the crime. No DNA was found, no firearms retrieved, and no forensic evidence linking him to the case at all. He was convicted based on the testimony of a friend who claimed he confessed to the crime to him.
This was a reliable witness in 2014 who told the detectives, I asked him if he did it, and he said yes.
When 16-year-old Villegas was brought in for questioning, an El Paso detective threatened him with beatings and the death penalty unless he confessed to the murder. Under duress, the teenage Villegas signed a prepared confession from the detectives. He attempted to withdraw his confession a few hours later, but it was already too late. Villegas was charged with 2 counts of capital murder, with the false confession being the sole evidence against him. After spending 18 years behind bars, his verdict was eventually overturned, and Villegas was released on bond. He got married and started a family during this time. However, a third trial awaited him, which would determine his fate. Finally, the moment arrived, and Villegas stood in the courtroom uncertain if he would return home to his family or be sent back to prison for life. Watch as the judge delivers the news to Daniel that his 18-year-long nightmare was finally over.
In the District Court of El Paso County, Texas, 409th Judicial District, the State of Texas versus Daniel Villegas, number 94-0D09328. Verdict Form B. We, the jury, find the defendant Daniel Villegas not guilty of...
Daniel was incarcerated for a total of 23 years, 6 months, and 11 days. Daniel's case is guaranteed to bring out your emotional side. However, not all courtroom proceedings gain attention because of the feel-good factor. There is the disturbing case of Nikko Jenkins, who is facing charges after he embarked on a killing spree, spanning a 10-day period in Omaha, Nebraska. When Jenkins was just 15 years old, he was sent to a youth correctional facility and served a decade-long sentence for carjacking and assault. Shortly after his release from the youth correctional facility, Jenkins went on a rampage on August 13, 2013. Jenkins lured 2 men, Julian Uribe Pena and Jorge S.I. Carrigo Ruiz, with the guise of having intimate relations with 2 women, only to abruptly shoot them. Only 4 days later, on August 17th, the body of Curtis Bradford was found. Bradford was a former inmate Nikko had encountered during his time in prison and proceeded to kill him in his own garage. His final victim was Andrea Kruger, a victim whose body was found by the road with multiple gunshot wounds. All of these incidents took place in a 2-week time period. Jenkins was initially arrested on unrelated charges. It was during this time that law enforcement stumbled upon evidence connecting him to one of the murders, including the matching ammunition. The authorities confronted Jenkins with their findings, emphasizing the substantial evidence they had amassed against him.
I got Nikko Jenkins. Do you not realize that? I got Nikko Jenkins. I got you. We really got you. I got your DNA at the murder scene. I got your DNA in the car. Sure. I got the weapon. I got Nikko Jenkins.
The motive behind these gruesome acts was as shocking as the crimes themselves. Jenkins claimed that the murders were sacrificial acts for the Egyptian god Apophis.
Like, okay, my religion of Chthonias Rebel, that's the underworld. He was like on the mummy, the black book. So this was them, my little cousins, the one that were in the house with me. That when I got to serve the search warrant.
Right.
This was their ritual of sacrifice.
Jenkins entered a plea of no contest to the 4 charges of first-degree murder and voluntarily waived his right to a trial by jury. The court proceedings were marked by Jenkins' erratic behavior, including speaking in tongues, fits of laughter. Ultimately, a panel of 3 judges would conform to determine his guilt or innocence.
One of these murders was a deliberate and planned act. The victims were pre-selected and the murders were purposeful.
The murders were characterized as deliberate and premeditated, with the victims being specifically targeted.
The defendant's commission of these 4 murders over a 10-day period is one of the worst killing sprees in the history of this state.
Upon being convicted of all 4 murders, Jenkins remained motionless as the sentence was delivered. The panel unanimously concluded that the death penalty was fitting, imposing it for each of the murders committed by Jenkins. Strikingly, Jenkins exhibited an unresponsive demeanor in the face of being sentenced to death.
Should be and is hereby given for each of the 4 murders by the defendant.
Additionally, he received a staggering sentence of up to 500 years in prison for his other charges. However bad you think Nikko Jenkins' case was, next we have a case that features 2 brutal teenage murderers. This is Antonio Barbeau, who with his best friend Nathan Paape, brutally murdered his grandmother in an attempted robbery in Sheboygan County, Wisconsin.
We got in, and then I looked to Nate, he nodded, and then I took the first swing.
Okay, and when you say that you took the first swing is with the hand axe?
Yes, sir.
The boys, who were both only 13 at the time, had intended to sneak up at his grandmother's and rob her. But upon showing up at the house, they were spotted and invited inside. She was attacked with a hatchet and a hammer, ultimately being struck at least 27 times until she died.
Started heading into the living room, falling.
And as she was falling, did you strike her again?
I hit one more time as she was falling.
At any point, did you not have the hand axe during this incident?
Right after that, Nate took it and he used it, the blade side of it.
You said that he took off the sweater. By that, do you mean the sweater that you had given him?
Yes.
Why did he do that?
I think because it was getting in the way.
Getting in the way of what?
Him swinging.
They then stole $155 in cash and some jewelry before stealing the car and ditching it at a local bowling alley, hoping to frame someone else for the crime. A few days later, both boys were arrested. Now, in court, Barbeau takes the stand to testify.
We were going to try to scare her to get money and then use force if needed.
And when you say use force if needed, was there a discussion about what type of force you might use?
An attack, I guess to kill.
Barbeau pleaded no contest to first-degree intentional homicide as part of a plea deal, where he was sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole in 36 years. He would then be 50 years old, and in his final statement, his lawyer had to finish his thoughts.
I know I don't show my emotions much. I myself am not sure why, but that doesn't mean I don't.
I took away someone's mother, grandma, sister, friend, when I had no right to do so.
Paape was sentenced to life in prison as well, but with a chance of parole when he's 45 years old. This is Jordan Fuss.
I'm sorry. I wish it was me. He did not deserve it. I did.
Facing charges for manslaughter in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the 22-year-old was found guilty of DUI manslaughter in a 2014 crash that claimed the life of 6-year-old Santiago Giraldo. Fuss was shaking uncontrollably as he entered the courtroom with his family. He had a blood alcohol level of 0.21, which is more than twice the legal limit. He was traveling over 90 miles per hour on Sterling Road when he crashed his 2004 Infiniti G35 into another vehicle at Davie Road just before midnight on October 3, 2014. Prosecutors had sought the maximum sentence for the crime. Fuss's attorney argued for a reduced sentence, stating that his client had been so remorseful that he had contemplated suicide. However, prosecutors stated that Fuss had admitted to using alcohol and smoking marijuana since the crash. The Giraldo family cried in court, while the defense argued for a lighter sentence. Santiago's father took the stand and had this to say while staring directly into Jordan's eyes.
May God forgive you, because I can't. He didn't just take my son's life, he took mine too.
During the trial, Fuss can be seen apologizing to the victim's family in tears.
I'm sorry. I wish it was me. He did not deserve it. I did.
He also expressed his love for his family members and girlfriend, whom he met online after the crash. Then came the verdict as Jordan was sentenced to 14 years in prison.
Court imposes the lowest permissible prison sentence
allowable by Florida's Criminal Punishment Code, 14.625 years.
He continued crying as he learned his fate.
I love you guys so much. I love you.
This is Elis Nelson Ortiz Nievez.
The bruises, some of the bruises were in the shape of a belt buckle.
Man, I ain't gonna let you, I ain't gonna let you sit here and say no crazy shit about me, man. No, man, because he's saying shit he don't even know, man.
He's facing charges for the murder of an infant in Michigan. The cause of death was physical abuse, which was later ruled as murder. The 4-year-old boy, Giovanni Mejias, was the son of Ortiz Nievez's girlfriend, Sonia Hernandez. Sonia claims she had no involvement in the crime, however, her neighbor had a different side of the story.
Sonia was well aware. She was well aware of what was happening because she told him that was his responsibility to whoop them.
Ortiz Nievez denied abusing the boy, but the judge and prosecutors believe his beating the child resulted in his death. Kent County deputies reported that when they arrived at the Gaines Township trailer where Ortiz Nievez was left to care for several children under 11, it was here that they found Giovanni left on the kitchen floor. An autopsy showed that Giovanni died from internal bleeding caused by an abdominal tear, which would have been caused by an adult, not a child. During the trial, Kent County Circuit Court Judge Mark Trausock can be heard condemning Ortiz Nievez's actions, reprimanding him in very strong words, and insisting that he should never be allowed out of prison.
You are the lowest form of human life that I've been able to observe or see. That you committed this murder and that you beat this little boy to death.
The judge described the injuries suffered by Giovanni before his death, causing Ortiz Nievez to become upset and struggle with deputies who had to remove him from the courtroom.
You had put cigarettes out on this poor little child. There was evidence of that from the pictures. Anybody says anything back there?
Ortiz Nieves was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole and was given a sentence of 80 to 150 years for first-degree child abuse. This is Kimmberly Kessler, who is charged with the murder of her co-worker in Nassau County, Florida.
Jordan Beard is Jolene Cummings' cousin.
Kessler was working at a Tangles hair salon under a fake name. She reportedly was on the run for 25 years and wanted in several states. She wouldn't be found until she brutally murdered her co-worker with scissors and allegedly disposed of her body. This is Kessler after she was arrested and awaiting trial.
Are we on mute anyway, so I can say whatever the I want?
We're not on mute.
Oh, okay.
And this is what it was like to supervise her in jail.
She began to remove feces from styrofoam trays in the back of her cell and smear on herself on the walls. She began to throw feces at Smith, Miller, and I.
Now, in the trial, she had to go to a separate room due to her outbursts.
I refuse them. I have refused them. I refuse the public defender's office. They appointed Jolene Cummings' cousin as my public defender. What, you don't want the public to know that?
And she continuously made false claims about her former public defender. She was later found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without parole.